It appears as though the Trudeau government is being pressed to enact new gun control regulations to combat domestic gun violence. Now, to chat about this in more detail is Sun political commentator Brian Lilley, who joins us once again from Toronto. Brian, you say the bigger problem when it comes to gun crime is really the amount of illegal guns which are making their way up into Canada through the United States?
And that was put on display here in the Toronto area just last week. On a single day, police in 3 jurisdictions, it wasn't one of these big operations that involved multiple jurisdictions, just Toronto Police, Peel Regional Police, which is Mississauga and Brampton, and Durham, which is the suburbs to the east of the city. They all announced a ton of arrests. Hal, 98 people arrested, 49 guns seized. These were people who were trafficking in guns and drugs. Over 1,000 charges laid across these 3 jurisdictions, all announced in one day. And when you spoke to the police officers, the chiefs involved, they would tell you that there is a major problem with guns being smuggled up from the border. Out in Durham region, they broke up what they said was a gun trafficking ring that stretched all the way from places like Oshawa to British Columbia in terms of their gun trade. And they are smuggling guns in from the United States, selling them to other criminal elements here in Canada. So, look, I don't want to say that these regulations that the gun control groups are pressing for are not important. They are, and they're probably ones, most of them, would be ones that even strident gun rights advocates would support, because it's around someone who was convicted of domestic violence not being able to get a gun. That's pretty much, people are on board with that sort of thing. But again, the problem with the Trudeau government is they always focus on legal licensed gun owners and finding ways to make their life more difficult, when the gun violence that we see in our streets is driven by smuggled guns, whether it's in Alberta or British Columbia or here in Ontario. It doesn't matter where you are. That's the major source for guns coming in. And you look at many of the guns that are seized by police, and they'll put out a photo saying, we seized 20 guns, what have you, in this raid. And there's the photo, and you look, and they're prohibited. They're guns that you can never legally buy in Canada. So the Trudeau government needs to adjust its focus from constantly on the side of legal licensed gun owners and adding more and more regulations. And if they want real bang for their buck, pardon the pun, then they've got to put the focus on the border.
And Brian, a recent poll says Canadians have really lost faith in the Trudeau government and its ability to handle the immigration issue in our country. Are we moving towards the same place as the United States when it comes to immigration being a real hot button issue right now?
Well, I hope not, because it's a very polarizing and divisive issue in the United States. Now, to some degree, the Trudeau Liberals have been trying to import the American rhetoric around immigration to Canada. And so down in the United States, there is very little distinction between legal immigration and illegal immigration, primarily because the biggest source of immigration are people that come across the border into the United States illegally. In Canada, it's the opposite. We have had, until recently, a well-functioning immigration system. But a few things have happened. The Trudeau Liberals decided they were going to take it from about the 250 to 300,000 people a year coming as permanent residents that we saw during the Harper years. That was not controversial at all. A couple of years ago, they decided we want to ramp that up to 500,000 a year. They're now even questioning that. The illegal immigration side, people coming and claiming asylum as soon as they get here, when they were allowed entry as on a visitor's visa, that's a major issue. It's undermining faith in the system. The temporary foreign workers program, the Prime Minister admitting last week that things have gotten out of control on that. All of that has led to a sense from many Canadians that we're bringing in too many people too fast. 65% in the most recent Leger poll for Post Media. It mirrors a poll done for the Association of Canadian Studies a few months ago. And that was the one where they've been tracking this question every year for a number of years. And you go back 5 years, just 35% said we have too many people coming in. Now it's 65 in 2 consecutive polls. That tells you that things are going badly. And the Trudeau Liberals, in my view, have broken the consensus on the immigration system. They've broken the system and how Canadians feel about it.
And Brian, a recent issue that really exploded on the immigration file is the case of Ahmed El-Didi, the man accused in a terror plot and of partaking in that ISIS video showing another man being dismembered. So how can the government really claim the system is working as it should when this guy received Canadian citizenship?
Yeah, it was shocking to watch Dominic LeBlanc, who is, in my view, one of the most politically astute of Justin Trudeau's ministers. And that's why Trudeau uses him as his fixer. There's a ministry that's had a problem. Guess who goes in there? Dominic LeBlanc. Every prime minister tends to have someone like that. LeBlanc is the fixer for Trudeau. But he's also been around politics his whole life. His dad was a Pierre Trudeau cabinet minister. His dad was governor general. So he knows his way around politics, and he's there at committee being questioned by the Conservatives of how this guy was allowed not only to get into Canada, but get citizenship. And he just kept saying the system worked as it should. He was trying to put all the focus on how police operated once they had the tip off, did not want to admit that there was a failure in letting this man into the country. They just tried to walk past that. But they did release a timeline of how he came to Canada. And he was first denied entry in December 2017. Officials at the embassy, and I believe it was in Cairo, said, no, we don't think you're a true visitor, meaning they believed he was going to show up in Canada and declare asylum while coming on a tourist visa. So they said no to him. The next month, he provided more paperwork, more information. They said, okay, you're approved. Came in February 2018. June of that year, he declares asylum. Then he gets his permanent residency. Then in May of 2024, he became a Canadian citizen. Just May. He was arrested in July. The police were onto him in June. So he gets citizenship.
Wow.
And then is allegedly plotting to cause a mass casualty event in Toronto. He was put through security several times. And we have to be really concerned about this, Hal, because they keep saying this is the same type of security they're using to screen people coming in from Gaza. We've got 5,000 people coming in from an area controlled by a terrorist group. You have to know that Hamas is going to try and get their people out and into Canada, globalize the intifada, as they say, but also because Hamas is losing to Israel in their war. So they're going to be trying to get people out. And the government says, don't worry, biometrics. Well, that's a nice buzzword. It means fingerprints. And if they don't find your fingerprint in a Canadian database, you're getting through. This shows that we need better screening, that the system didn't work properly, but the Trudeau government doesn't want to admit that either for Mr. El-Didi or for the 5,000 Palestinians that are coming in from a war zone.
Wow, yeah, it sounds like Canadians should be concerned about a lot of the immigrants being vetted properly, Brian. Now, we just had Labor Day, and over the long weekend, a video of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau being confronted by a steelworker has gone viral. This man was not too happy with the Prime Minister. I saw the video as well, and many of his policies. Brian, who's winning the actual blue-collar vote in Canada right now?
Right now, it would be Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. Justin Trudeau clearly doesn't have the vote of that man at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Trudeau showed up with donuts and got an earful instead of a thank you. So Poilievre has been going to places. He was at Stelco Steel in Hamilton a little while ago. Now, Stelco is the unionized. There's two big steel mills in Hamilton, and Stelco's the unionized one. In Local 1005, some of those guys are really hardcore on the union stuff, and not normally a blue voter. They were applauding and loving Pierre Poilievre. It was remarkable. So you can see where Poilievre is reaching through. Half of men who are more likely to be doing blue collar jobs, almost half of men, 47%, say they will be voting for Poilievre and the Conservatives in the next election. That's a staggering level of support. Poilievre also released his own video saluting the workers on Labor Day and talking about people, the country's built by those who rise before the sun is up and work hard, and don't worry, you're going to have a better future going forward. It's really interesting because he's putting that out as a salute. That's going to get him some, people will feel warm and fuzzy about it, kind of a Morning in America, Ronald Reagan type ad. Jagmeet Singh put out an attack ad against Poilievre. This tells you that he's getting the unionized blue-collar vote because he put out an attack ad against them. But it wasn't a pipe fitter who was denouncing Pierre Poilievre. was two unionized union leaders, the head of the BC Federation of Labor and the head of the Ontario Federation of Labor, both who come from public service job backgrounds. That's who the NDP still has, civil servants, whereas Poilievre is taking the blue collar vote.
Brian, Prime Minister Trudeau was in Halifax recently for his cabinet retreat where ministers voiced support and really urged him to stay on as leader. Now, next week, he'll be in BC for a caucus retreat. Will he receive the same support there?
Probably not. What we'll be looking for at that caucus retreat is, does anyone break ranks? And that's happened before. You think of Jean Chrétien in the early 2000s. I believe it was at a caucus retreat just like this in, might have been northern Quebec, and he had people breaking ranks, saying he had to go. And what's remarkable about that is Chrétien had just won his third majority. He wasn't someone who was down at 24, 23% in the polls and fading. Chrétien was still wildly popular, and they still said he had to go. So there's been some mutterings. Will they break out in the open? That's what I think everyone's going to be watching for. And when you've got that many people, it's harder to keep everyone in line than it is, say, just a cabinet that's much smaller. Wayne Long, who's not running again, he's already said that Trudeau should go. Is anyone else that is either not running or in a seat that's really threatened, will they step up and say, you know what, he's got to go? I mean, what about someone like George Halal in Calgary? His seat is going to be threatened for sure. I think he should be one of the people saying the PM's lost touch with Canadians. This is not good for Alberta. It's time for him to step down and have fresh leadership.
2 more by-elections are coming up. Do you think the Trudeau government could lose more seats like they did with the recent Toronto by-election win by the Tories?
Absolutely, they could. They only hold one of the 2 seats. So there's the a by-election in Elmwood, Transcona. That's in Winnipeg area, northeast part of the city. That's primarily thought to be a battle between the NDP and the Conservatives. The Conservatives have nominated a member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, back to the blue collar thing. The NDP nominated a executive director of a business improvement association. So kind of reversed roles here. But, I wrote about this recently, about the battle being between them. And I had some people write and say, you know what, the NDP's taking a beating and the Liberals, might put up a fight. I think if the NDP takes a beating, the Conservatives win the Winnipeg riding, which they have held in the past from 2011 to 2015. Montreal is a riding called LaSalle et Verdun. That was held by David Lametti. Prior to that, years ago, it was held by Paul Martin in the, when he was before Prime Minister and when he was Finance Minister. The NDP are threatening that one. They held that from 2011 to 2015. They've nominated a popular councillor, city councillor to run in that area. The Liberals have appointed someone who's a borough councillor. That's a lower level municipal official in Montreal's bizarre city political system. So the NDP have a real shot at taking that one. And if they do, wow. I mean, you can imagine that Trudeau would face more pressure if he lost that one.
Brian, journalist Andrew Coyne wrote a recent op-ed in the Globe and Mail discussing how Pierre Poilievre is not very likable. He says if he wasn't so unpleasant, he might get more of a hearing for his agenda. Now, many Canadians you and I have chatted with, Brian, would argue otherwise, saying Poilievre is quite likable and that you really shouldn't release all of the details of your platform before you're elected, since the Trudeau government could potentially use some of them.
Well, they're already stealing ideas from him, especially on housing, although they're doing it badly. They're doing it, dealing with federal lands in a way that essentially amounts to you will own nothing and be happy, because they want to lease the land rather than sell it so that you can buy a home and live on a plot of land that you own. They want to lease it. So they are stealing his ideas. But I saw that column from Andrew Coyne, and it just left me puzzled. Like, he knows how to read a poll. And 43% in the latest Leger poll say they are voting for Pierre Poilievre. 47% of men, 40% of women say they're voting for him. He's doing far better than the Trudeau Liberals, far better than Jagmeet Singh. And you look at other polls as well that, best prime minister. He is doing about double what Trudeau and Singh are garnering when it comes to best prime minister. So, I mean, how much more support does he want? Coyne is someone who has made it clear he does not like Pierre Poilievre, doesn't think he's the right type of conservative. But, Coyne sits in his fancy restaurant in Rosedale in Toronto, writing his columns, looking down his nose at the rest of Canada. The rest of Canada is looking at Poilievre and saying this is a better alternative to Justin Trudeau. So I really just don't understand it at all. Be contrarian if you want, Coyne, but I mean, you got to base it in some facts. And the facts are Poilievre is running away in every major poll.
Political reporter and Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you.